and welcome everyone to a new season of ZHdK Art Talks program hosted by the Department Fine Arts. My name is Gabrielle Schad. I'm a research associate working here at the school at the department, and I have the pleasure and honor to host and moderate those talks. In this season, we have our guest Tarek Lakhrissi, who goes first. He's already with us. Thank you for your patience. And then we'll also have on 30th of March, Lorenza Longhi in conversation, and on 4th of May, Deborah Joyce Holman, who are both visiting lecturers, visiting mentors in the studios of the Master Fine Arts program of our department. Thanks everyone for joining. Please make sure to note down these future talks. And before we start with an insight into Tarek's practice, I'm happy to say a few words about him and about his trajectory. Tarek Lakhrissi is born in 1992 in Châtellerault in France. He is a visual artist and poet based in Paris. Currently, he teaches in Switzerland, not mainly at our school, which he also does, but also at the same time at the research master program of the visual art departments at HED, Geneva School of Art and Design. Lakhrissi has been exhibiting internationally at galleries and institutions for contemporary art, like the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Second Biennale of Sydney, the Wiels, the Palazzo Rebaudengo in Sandretto in Torino, and the Manchester International Festival, Shedhalle, Zurich, the Fondation Ricard in Paris, the Quadriennale di Roma, the Palazzo delle Esposizioni, High Art Paris, Kevin Space, Vienna, Hayward Gallery, Grand Palais, FIAC, Fondation Lafayette, Anticipations, and many more. So we are conscious that you are in many institutional contexts and beyond that present at the very moment. And I'm very happy that you could make time to talk to us tonight and to share about your art.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. I'm in London, so I had this kind of like time difference problem. But I'm ready. I'm really excited to start. And I also wanted to maybe, there is a moment for questions at the end, right? So maybe I can just start talk and then we will have some Q&A, right?
Yes, exactly. Also, just a quick note to the audience, you can at any time type your questions into the chat. We will make sure that they get answered towards the end. You can also join us with your own voice if you feel like entering this conversation space. And I wanted to point out that this talk will be recorded. So if you don't feel like figuring in this context, please make sure to turn off your cameras or switch your names. That's it from my side. So it's really your turn, Tarek. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So hi to everybody. It's weird to not see everybody, but hi. I wish that it could happen in real, in presence, because I'm really interested also of what's happening in terms of interactions in spaces of in-betweenness. And I wish that this in-betweenness tonight will create and will at least give us some insights and good conversations or hard conversations. I don't know, we'll see. So I'm Tarek Lakhrissi, and I'm a French Moroccan artist, and I'm working a lot with different medias like sculptures, installations, films, performances, and poetry. My background is it's mostly about like literature. I studied French literature in Paris, in Sorbonne Nouvelle. I also studied theater for like 5 years. I did the bachelor and then the master. And it's a very important information because all my practice is based on language, and one of my principal obsession is language. There is this beautiful quote by Octavia Butler, the black sci-fi writer. She wrote, "Without positive obsession, there is nothing at all." And I would say that language is my positive obsession. I also have, I do speak French, Arabic, and English. And I also come from a very specific background because I come from a more like working class background. So I didn't necessarily like grew up with I don't know, books or any things in relation to what we call culture, what we call like much more like intellectual / elitistic knowledge. So I'm also a self-taught artist. So I went to the university, but I was one of the only one in my family who got the chance to go to the university. But I never been to an art school. So it's also quite very interesting for me to talk in the context of an art school because it's actually something that I'm discovering throughout the 2 last years, as I'm also teaching in Geneva at the head school. Yeah, and I think this presentation will be a lot about like showing maybe 3 or 4 examples of the work that I'm doing, and possibly some extracts, obviously, of movies and performances. Get back to it, trying to, give some explanations of my also creative process, and give also more information about my references and all. I mean, the way I work. So that being said, I also would like to add more about my experience. So I worked in this queer bookstore for 6 years in Paris. So I really have this like weird like kind of direction where I always wanted to do art, but I finally ended up in more like in the literature background. So I was at university studying literature, French literature. Then I worked in this bookstore for like 6 years. It's kind of like interesting also to understand how this experience in the bookstore was a way to start to build actually a world of references, a world with different ghosts of dead writers and thinkers, but also, of course, contemporary. And all my kind of like creative process also start from all these books that I met, that I'm still discovering, that I'm rereading, and obviously poetry, because I write. Oh my God, I talk in the past. I'm still writing poetry. Yeah, when I was doing my master, I also went for a year doing a master in Canada. So I was in Montreal. And I was at the Université de Montréal, which is a much more like francophone university. And I also went to anglophone universities that are McGill and Concordia. Sorry. And McGill was actually quite an important moment and a key moment in my process, because it was the first time that I had actually a person of color as a teacher. Her name is Sherman Nelson. She's one of the rare Black art historian in Canada. And she had this seminar, I guess, called the representation of the Black body in culture, in pop culture. So we were like studying like all the kind of like representations of this Black body. And it was kind of a very important moment for me, because it was the first time that basically saw this possibility to think about art in a much more political way, in a much more like sociological way, and historical way, and all this question of the representation of the brown and the black body was also, I mean, is also like a matter for me, and it's a very important question. And I'm trying to all the time also go back to what it means, what representation means, how representation is also not a problem, but it's a burden. How we have to go much more far, much more further. How we also have to think in our bodies, in institutional artistic bodies, in a specific way, especially when we are under commons, to quote Fred Moten. So brown, black people, queer, poor people, because not everybody in the art world is rich. And so this is kind of like a very quick introduction to give you a little bit more details about my background. I identify also as queer, so as a queer brown body. So all my practice is also kind of like in relation to the experience of the people of color and the queer people of color specifically, in relation to language, to institutions, to emotions, to society. I'm going to start maybe with the beginning of my practice. I started to do art maybe like 7, 8 years ago, with more like films and performances, because it's also like two mediums that are very accessible, where you don't have the luxury to go to, for example, to a studio, and it's easy to like shoot a movie. You can grab like a cell phone or a very not expensive, or you can also like ask a friend to lend you a camera, and the performance, you just need to have your body. So I started to do that kind of like different performances, and I shot this movie called Diaspora Situations. That is a movie that I shot. I first started to shoot in Montreal, and then I continue to shoot in Paris and London, actually. And it was about the experience of queer of color artists, but also activists, dancers, cooks. I mean, it was kind of like different people that usually are my friends. And I started to interview them to kind of like ask them, how do they cope? What kind of strategies they find and they are thinking about to survive in a society that is mainly racist and homophobic and sexist. And this movie kind of started to have a lot of attention, which was for me quite a surprise, because I didn't really have any experience in the kind of like filmmaking industry. And it was kind of like the beginning for me to exist in a way in the art world. And I ended up traveling to US also to show the movie at the Johns Hopkins University, for example. But this was kind of like the starting point of my practice. And I kind of like continue to like work more about the subjects, about the bodies, especially the bodies in the space. And it was much more recent that I started to think more about the sculptures, for example. But I'm gonna share my screen and to start to also show you a couple of images when I'm talking. Here is an example of an installation. Everybody sees my screen, right? Yeah, okay. It's an installation called Unfinished Sentence that I started to work on two and 3 years ago. And it's a collection of different spears, as you can see, and all the spears are distorted. And I started to work on this series after reading a book called Les Guerrières by Monique Wittig. I don't know, I think, it has been, of course, translated. Les Guerrières means basically the warriors. And it's a book about an insurrection of women and a different group of women against men in society. And this book has been published in 1969 in France in this very like experimental, at that time, publishing house called Minuit, les Éditions de Minuit, so Minuit, a midnight publishing house. Yeah, I was kind of like, I was invited by this curator to work on this book, and I knew another book that she wrote, but I never really read this one at that time. And I was kind of like shocked by the way that Monique Wittig, so the writer, wrote, the way that she started to, for me, create a whole new language based on codes, based on different associations, and based on different constellations. And I started to like draw like 30 spears that are then hanged by chains. And all these spears basically create a whole like a form of a body, like a group of body, a body of course weapons, threatening but also fascinating weapons. And you were basically walking around. So these are like exhibition views from the Palais Tokyo in Paris, and you could like walk around this whole space with a whole soundtrack. That has been made in collaboration with another artist called delle, who's also a close friend. And the whole soundtrack is actually lasting 18 minutes. And it was kind of like creating a whole like kind of a very like dreamy, but also threatening, but also kind of like mesmerizing environments. And the soundtrack has been inspired by two TV shows that were very important to me when I was a child. So Xena, the Warrior Princess, and Buffy the Slayer, that I love so much and I'm obsessed with. Another positive obsession, Buffy the Slayer. So if you never watched this TV show, you should watch this TV show because it's iconic. And yeah, because for me it was important to like create connections with Monique Wittig. So the warriors that she basically paid tribute in 1969, but also kind of create a jump in the time with Buffy the Slayer, who are for me like the warrior in my time, and also kind of like a queer feminist character to me. And also I made connections with people like my mother, my sisters. I was about to say my mothers. Maybe Buffy is one of my mother. My mother, my sisters, but also other activists and women of color that are highly activist and active in the anti-racist and feminist scene in France, like Elsa Dorlin, Kautara Hashi, etc., etc. So with this installation, I really wanted to create this kind of like lineage, this kind of like intergenerational kind of like process that for me kind of created this whole like magical environment. And yeah, unfinished sentence, because all the spears basically in the space kind of create a whole sentence to me. And this sentence is something that you can imagine, that you can project, but it's kind of like unsaid, it's unseen, and it's also based on your own experience. Yeah, so unfinished sentence, it's one of the three artworks that I wanted to talk to you about. I'm going to talk about another project that's called Out of the Blue, and it's a movie. So this is the first version of the unfinished sentence that I've done. It's like with smaller spears. It has been exhibited also in France at this art center called Crac Alsace, close to the German border. So out of the blue, sorry. It's a movie that I directed a couple of years ago in the frame of my solo show called Chameleon Club. Chameleon Club, to give very like quick inside quick information about this solo show is that it has been inspired by this thinker that is very dear to me, queer thinker, queer Cuban thinker, José Esteban Muñoz, who wrote we can think about 2 books, even though he wrote all the other stuff, but he published, I think, only 2 books. Disidentifications and Cruising Utopia. I discovered actually him in Montreal when I was studying there, and it was for me, you know, this kind of books that when you read and you feel seen for the first time, and especially the Disidentifications was a very important book for me because it was the first time that I read a book that was specifically dedicated to a queer of color practice, especially about performance practice. And to just give it very shortly, because it's a very complex, and it's a book that you should read, but it's all about like creating strategies by Disidentifications. And Disidentification is a way to create a code within a code. So it's a way to kind of like basically disrupt the system with like giving something to see and to show, but inside this thing that you're showing, you're actually creating a whole new code. So you're like hacking something. I'm really giving like a very like simple definition of that, but I really recommend you to like go and check this book. It's a very beautiful book. But to go back to my movie, Out of the Blue, it's a movie that is kind of like starting from a joke, like a joke from actually an extreme right concept that is unfortunately getting more and more popular in France, called Le Grand Remplacement, which you can translate by the big replacement. And it's a kind of like a conspiracy theory that is based on the fear of the people of color, and especially people of color in France. And this fear, it states that, so we, because I'm going to include myself in that question, we're going to invade basically France, and we kind of like represent this like really fear of like, especially a fear number of like us and our community being like kind of like the invaders. So basically the UFOs. And this theory has been created by this journalist called Renaud Camus, so extreme rights journalist. So it's obviously like a racist and then a xenophobic concept. But it for some reason it got more attention. So now it has been kind of like reused currently by some extreme rights thinkers, and that's kind of crazy because it's obviously a wrong concept, and it's obviously a concept that is very problematic and very controversial. But I say that it was a joke because at some point in some activist circles that I kind of was in touch with, there was like this joke being like, je vais te grand remplacer, which you can translate by I will great replace you, like basically, which you can I don't know, translate as get the fuck out of here, or like just you should go. And I was like, oh, it's interesting how this kind of like concept has been reused by minoritarian communities, and how I heard this concept that's like super violent, but that has been now ridiculed in a way by minoritarian communities. So all of this to say that in this movie, I decided to write the story of this main character that you can see here, who goes to the cinema, and he basically falls asleep watching an old sci-fi science fiction movie, and when he wakes up, there is like UFOs who basically kidnapped all the big CEOs in the world. So they've all been trapped in the cinema, and I'm going to show you an extract of this movie. And Do you see my screen with the video? Yeah. Okay.
Je suis l'élu.
Les extraterrestres demandent après toi, à ce qui paraît. Le show va commencer.
Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. Incomplète autant que l'absolu peut l'être. Par mon nom, à trouver ce que l'ombre reflète. La liberté est-elle effrayante en un sens? Les conséquences des défauts font souffrance. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. En réfléchissant à une plausible option à la faire taire, j'ai choisi de me choisir. J'ai fini par m'y réduire. Impossible de plaire à toute la terre. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. Une main posée sur l'estomac et l'autre sur le thorax. Je sais que personne ne se perfectionnera à ma place. Attendant constamment l'alignement des astres, tout en agissant dans l'instant. Je sais que personne ne se perfectionnera à ma place. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire. Amère est la vérité. Va falloir s'y faire.
Yeah, so this is the end of the movie, and yeah, it's also like each time I rewatch it, I'm like also realizing how much melancholy is very important in my work, and how like melancholy for me it's kind of like a starting point. It's like a process for like for self transformation, and how melancholy, especially in a world that is collapsing, i.e. our world, there is a quite a very big importance to like go back to yourself and go back to your own internal self, to also find some rest, and trying to find some rest if that's possible. And obviously I'm addressing also this concept of queer color fatigue in a space where, in a world where violence is hyper there is a need of emotions, there is a need of connections, and I very interested of like how art can create this kind of spaces, this kind of like in-betweenness, to go back to that. And yeah, obviously in the process of making this movie, I was rewatching David Lynch movie. Like if you have seen like Mulholland Drive, for example, you can maybe recognize some parallels with this scene of this character being on stage and expressing something that is bitter, like the truth is bitter. And yeah, I mean, I always like make jokes about like how it's funny because it's a movie about people being trapped in a space and thinking about their lives and having existential questions. And then COVID-19 happened 3 years after that, and we were all like trapped in a space, and we were not like able to like actually connect. And we obviously like crave as human for connection and projection in the future. And obviously this is like a very changing moment for all of us. But it's funny like how, yeah, I'm trying to address all these questions in very like simple ways. Could be this movie, could be like also like the installation with the spears. Can I talk about a last example, or should I think about possibly conclude?
Maybe you briefly present this last example, and then in about 10 minutes we turn to the Q&A session. Thanks so much.
What would be the last example then? Well, maybe let's talk about the performance, because I didn't talk that much about the performance. Here. Six at World. So this performance is a commission by the Wiels, the Belgium Museum, the Wiels Museum in Brussels. It's actually a project that I've been working on during the first lockdown. And I was rewatching Daria, the TV show, the teenager TV show. And I started to like kind of like work and draw this bed that I did in relation to, in collaboration with another artist called Théo Desmond. This bed was kind of like for me a projection of the body of Daria, so who is a teenager who's like spending a lot of time in her bed. And Daria, for the ones of you that don't really know her, she's like a MTV character, and she's this kind of like anti-hero character. Basically, she's always complaining about life, about the capitalist society, and she's always kind of like, she's kind of like for me the like the killjoy, the feminist killjoy, basically. And I started to like also see Daria as a queer character, and I imagined this bed that could be like a bed for her. And Six Sad World is also present in the TV show, because it's another TV show, but it's a fictional TV show, so it's kind of like a meta that Daria is always watching in the cartoon. And I worked in collaboration with Victor da Silva, who did the music, a friend, Jihan Yazami, who did the voice over, and the performer, Joshua Serafin, that you can see here, who is a Filipinx performer in Brussels. And we imagine this kind of like narrative of the body being on the bed, having a lot of wild dreams, sometimes erotic, sometimes much more like soft, sometimes much more violent. And in one moment of the performance, at some point, the character of Daria, who is now basically represented by Josh, is lip syncing on a song by Dua Lipa. So I can show you maybe one example of this, quick extract of the performance. And it was kind of like a very important moment, because it's also a moment of self-expression, especially in the queer community. Lip sync are very like famous in the RuPaul Drag Race culture, for example. And I'm just going to show you like a quick example of the lip sync, and then conclude, and then we will have the Q&A. So here's the extract. I'm going to share my screen. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you see the screen, right? Yes. yeah, to conclude, I will maybe quote someone that I love, who's Kai Cheng-thom. She's an activist and a mediator who gives she gave this beautiful quote about the apocalypse and the importance of love in the time of apocalypse. And I think this is right needed right now. So I'm just going to read to finish her quote, and I'm done. Okay. It's a quote that's coming from her book called I Hope We Choose Love. So in the midst of the despair, I've come to believe that love, the feeling of love, the politics of love, the ethics and ideology and embodiment of love is the only good option in this time of the apocalypse. What else do we have? I mean love that is kind, but that is also honest. Love that is courageous and relentless and willing to break the rules and smash the system. Love that cares about people more than ideas, that praises each and every one of us as essential and indispensable. I mean a love that is compassionate and accountable. I mean the love that confirms and reaffirms us as complex and fallible, yet lovable anyway. The love that affirms us as human. Thank you.
Thanks so much to you, Tarek. I see the audience is clapping, and so.
Oh, I don't see them. Can you clap again? Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you.
I think you gave us a really focused insight through the three examples, let's say, of your recent practice you zoomed in on. I invite everyone to ask their questions. There are also already some compliments dropping in, beautiful works from Josie, and maybe other people would also like to bring some questions forward regarding whatever it might be, your theoretical or literary sources, the transition to doing moving image works. You mentioned all these aspects, but then again, maybe someone wants also to know a little more about that, or you could even unfold a bit further while we're waiting for some questions. Another question I would bring up is really the potential of utopia. Seems to be something important for you, or utopias in a sense. Then we have, with those bits and pieces we've seen in the performative or let's say video works you've shown to us, seen also situations rather of confinement or a frustration. How does this combine with your aspiration, maybe also to write utopias?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, utopia, it's kind of like, for me, there's a tension with utopia because it's very cheesy to talk about some utopia usually, and at the same time it's kind of like the basis of Muñoz philosophy that I mentioned. He wrote Cruising Utopia, for example, in 2009, I think, and he passed away 2 years after. And for him, in this book, he talks about more like queerness as a possibility, as an inspiration, more than queerness as a fixed identity. And for me, it's very important because it's kind of like being us is this question of again, this in-betweenness. And for me, utopia is kind of like in between. It exists in a space of in-betweenness. And yeah, I feel like now I really feel like being optimistic, more like personally, like this is much more like a personal thing, is very important, because we are again living in a world right now that is, you know, in like complex, with COVID-19, with also the situation in Ukraine. And it kind of addresses questions of like, okay, what does it mean to make art in that context? Like, is it like how art can do something? I feel like art can become this utopia, this pretty privileged utopia, but it can become this utopia in a way that it kind of also brings us, like poetry, in some spaces that are they can give you hope, they can give you love, they can give you, or just like sharing something with someone that you know. And I feel like this is precious in that sense. But to go back to your question, sorry, because I kind of like, can you repeat maybe the what you mentioned about utopia? Or maybe I answered it.
Just also in a formal way, with the excerpts we've seen, there is probably a friction between the frustrations, the situations also all about, let's say, the bitterness in the first example, or the confinement situation of the island of this heterotopic bed, I don't know, that you draw up in that stage set for the performance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think all these feelings, bitterness, confinement, but also sadness, or violence, you know, or anger, are obviously feelings that are, yeah, kind of scary in a way. And I'm very interested by these feelings and emotions, because we can call them like ugly feelings in a way. And I feel like there's a lot of power in anger, there's a lot of power in bitterness, there's a lot of power in melancholy, there's a lot of power in being sad. And we don't really allow ourselves to go in that directions, because we always have to be like in this kind of like positive, like affirmative, you know, society. Yeah, I again, I feel like going back to yourself can give you a lot of strength, especially in these times. And maybe it's a way to remind ourselves. And I'm the first one to also get lost in things of life. But I wish that the installations or the movies that I'm doing are opening space, and creating, utopias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe it becomes obvious with what you said, this link to one of your sources of, let's say, inspiration or heroes, Jean Genet, the French writer who also proposed strategies of inversions. But before I take up too much space and time here, I, of course, want to bring forward the questions by our audience. Maybe first we turn to Nicolas, asking, you've worked with a lot of institutions. What have been your experiences like? What do you think about the institutions of the art world? It's a bit general.
No, sorry, I'm not laughing about the question. I'm just like, oh, it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah, institutions are the worst. I'm kidding. Yeah, what were my experience? I have to say that every experience were kind of like different, but this is kind of like an easy answer. We talked about frictions, melancholy, frustration. I think we can also talk about it when it's about institutions. It's hard, in a very honest way. It's very hard, but I also think that it's normal, because the world is hard, and everything is hard. I worked with other institutions. I worked as a bookseller, but I also did so many jobs and things before being an artist, and things were not that easy. And I think that in every situations, in every institutions, it's kind of like the same problem, and the problem is usually is that like institutions represent the domination, and it represents a dominant sphere, and it can maybe sometimes tend to to break all the people, all the things that are not strong enough, or that are considered as weak. And again, I'm referring to what's happening in terms of scales of dominations with people of color, women, queer people, disabled people, poor people, etc., etc., etc. But we also have to work with these institutions. We also have to deal with them, and we also have to negotiate. And this is always something that I'm like also trying to say and to tell to my students when it's about like these confrontations with the institutions, that how we can negotiate and find a space, maybe again of in-betweenness, that will be a space where you can be happy and not be frustrated, and be also satisfied of what you're doing. And it's usually possible, but you have to find strategies. And finding the strategies is, for me, I love it. It's a very fascinating process because this is what I like. I love strategy, and strategy is also kind of like it's coming from a whole let's say tradition of thinking. Being strategic doesn't mean necessarily being like smarter or anything. It means just like being ready that things will not go the way that you planned. Being ready to also surrender, being ready to have your project being totally different from what you thought. And I just recently shot a movie. So this is kind of like a very interesting anecdote. I shot a movie in a museum, but the museum, and it's a movie about kind of like police brutality, but the museum thought it was too radical. So I was kind of like scared that they were like about to cancel the project. So it's very interesting because I was kind of like, for the first time in my life, kind of like confronted in this kind of like political situation where you're just like, oh, what are you doing? I can't change the meaning of my work, right? But this is kind of like an extreme example, but it was kind of, then at the end of the day, they kind of let the whole shooting going on. But I was very like, it was kind of like a confrontation of the power of the institution, how the institution can say no in the way that they be like, no, it's too much for us. But yeah, I know other artists, for example, that are playing much more about these boundaries with institutions, and they're also making their own like process and their own like artistic and process. For me, I would say that I'm very in this kind of like, how can I make sure that what I'm going to do is exactly what I want to do? So how can I, find strategies? And it's very individual, but I know this is how I work, and I like that. And my strategies in Gabiano, being much more open, also saying no and putting boundaries when institutions say like, oh, we don't want this. You say, yeah, but I don't, like, this is what I want to do, and that's it. I know it depends on like also what's your character and how you perceive that. But I do think that it's always possible to find an in-between space, and it's all about strategy. So you have to be strategic. But Nicola, yeah, we can also talk about it later.
In private. Thanks so much. That sounded like a very nuanced answer, I guess. I was wondering, in dealing with, be it institutions or certain situations, is the strategy of bringing in other collaborators or a community also a way to try to balance the maybe asymmetric power relation prevalent in such situation?
Exactly. Yeah. It's also like it's a learning lesson that I had from Olivier Marbeuf, who is this black thinker in France, who once told me like, oh, if you like to answer to an invitation, if you don't want to be by yourself, just come with your friends. And I think this is such a brilliant idea and again strategy to like think about the power and like how being in a community and being arriving as a group can actually reverse the balance. And this is something that I always did and that I always done, but also because I felt like I'm inspired by my friends. I'm having all these conversations with my friends. I'm my friends kind of like without them I would not be here, and etc. And we all like nourishing ourselves, and we're all like sharing like references. We all go to the cinema together. We all go to the theater, etc., etc. So we're all like sharing something. And why should I erase that from the process? Why should I make like just make sure that I'm on my own, which is not true, not real? And I think like yeah, collaborating and having all this kind of like group of friends was always for me like a starting point. Like I did yeah, like 3 years ago, I did this performance. I created this performance called Different Alibis, and I just invited 3 or 4 friends, and we were just performing Out of the Blue that I mentioned just before the movie. All the cast were all friends. Like same for the performance. Six at World, Josh is a friend. Victor, who did the music, is a close friend. Jihan, who did this voiceover that you didn't hear, but it's kind of present in the performance. She's one of my closest friends. And I feel like it's kind of like also interesting to bring this intimacy in the process, and like how to think about intimacy as a way, also like a, you know, like a methodology. Intimacy as also a way to yeah, cope with, again, sometimes the power and the weight of institutions that like kind of like make sure that you're alone in the process and that you have to deal with them, etc. And I feel like having all these kind of like different power structures and also having this balance with other energies and other friends and friendships, I feel like it can be like a very powerful, you know, kind of like answer. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Community, yes.
Yeah, leaving the authorship myths of the solo ingenious whatever it might be, painter or artist, also be
exactly. And it's something you can see like when you watch a movie, like everybody at the end is credited. When you know, check a theater or a dance play, everybody's credited. But in the art world, it's like one person, it's like one name, and that's it. And you just erase the whole process of like working with collaborators. And I feel like it's another, like it's kind of like a problem in the art world, and it's something that I don't really like in a way. But it's interesting also to yeah, go back to this question of like authorship, this question of like this genius, this whole myth that we want to destroy, right?
right. There is another question from Josie. As a self-taught artist, was it very hard to get your work shown in the beginning? Could you describe some difficulties and how you overcame them, please?
Thank you for this question, Josie. Was it hard? I think that also the fact that I don't come from the art world kind of gave me a lot of freedom, in the sense that I didn't want to be so badly, you know, shown. I didn't want to be la la la. I was just kind of like, yeah, I know I want to be an artist. Maybe I didn't have the chance to go in art school or whatever because of my, you know, class. But I kind of like arrived in the art world in, like I would say, as a surprise, because like as I'm a self-taught, like I remember when I was started to like show my work, I remember like a couple of curators that I've been working with, they were all like saying to me like so many like racist stuff, for example, like as if like I don't really belong here, that oh, I'm just kind of like clown or whatever, to make sure that I didn't really to make me feel like I don't deserve to be here. And it kind of gives me gives me much more the strength to like show them that I deserve to be here, that I'm gonna be here and I'm gonna fucking stick around. And yeah, was it hard? I don't know, because if it's hard, it means that you have to really want it so badly. And I think I was just playing around at first, and it started to be very serious, and I started to make it my whole life. But it was a process. But what I can say that was hard was the treatments that I had as a person of color and as a queer person of color in this world that's mainly white, mainly also led by people that are bourgeois and elitistic, etc. And I feel like me as a brown body in that space, I just didn't feel very welcomed. And this was not easy. This is not still easy, even though I do have a lot of opportunities. I still sometimes feel very alone in the process. And I think as many other artists and artists of color, and yeah, this will be, I guess, one difficulty that I can talk about, like how this violent system was for me very difficult to cope with, but at the same time, again, friendships being very distant kind of helped me out to also overcome this difficulties and make sure that I will not stop, make sure that I will still be here to open my mouth, and make sure that I will take the space I want to take, right? And I deserve it, and it's and many other people deserve it, and we should all work for that.
Yeah.
Period.
Good statement. Maybe some other questions from our audience.
Thank you, Josie.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Deborah is in the room.
Yeah. Speaking about friends joining. Yes, I would say there is, of course, much more to still cover with your work and with a conversation, but I hope it will be an ongoing conversation between you and our students, and of course between you and everyone that perceives your work. If there's no question here coming in the chat, I would suggest to wrap it up for today.
I hope you had a good time.
I think we had a great time, and I'm so happy that you could make it to this chat room, to this Zoom room, and share with us.
Again, I'm so sorry. You must have been like, what? What's happening?
No worries.
No, but thank you so much for this invitation. I really loved it. I'm really happy.
We're looking forward to see much more of you, your work, and your collaborators, your community. And thanks so much for your time, Tarek.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to the school, and keep going.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone.
You
and
too.
see you at the next.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.